Isha Shabbat. And we're actually going to keep our Chumashim open because we are going to have a discussion about the Haftarah that was just finished. As I mentioned earlier, in this week's Torah portion, Jacob marries Leah instead of Rachel. It is very much an accident. His uncle Laban made the swap. He was in the dark the whole time, quite literally. It says that it was dark outside, and when they went to consummate the marriage, he could not see his partner until morning. It's reasonable to assume that Rachel and Leah, as sisters, may have looked rather similar and probably sounded similar too, to explain his confusion. Had there been light outside, he would have easily been able to notice the nuances that distinguished these sisters from each other. Regarding the Haftarah, we also need to be able to detect these nuances. I mentioned that we had a choice this week between doing the Sephardic selection or the Ashkenazi selection. And though I read today from the Sephardic, we're going to look now at the Ashkenazi as well. At first glance, these seem to be similar. They are only a chapter apart. They're both from the book of Hosea. God is reprimanding the people of Israel, represented here by the tribe of Ephraim. But in order to really appreciate the differences and the nuances between these two Haftarot that are so close together, we're going to have to take a trip to the zoo, believe it or not. So we're going to turn to the Ashkenazi selection on page 190. This is not what I read from earlier. Page 190. And we're going to read together in the English verses 5 through 11 at the bottom of towards the bottom of the page. We're going to do it in English. These are the words of God to the tribe of Ephraim, which is being reprimanded. Verses 5 through 11, we're reading together. I looked after you in the desert, in a thirsty land. When they grazed, they were sated. When they were sated, they grew haughty, and so they forgot me. So I am become like a lion to them. Like a leopard, I lurk on the way. Like a bear robbed of her young, I attack them and rip open the casing of their hearts. I devour them like a lion. The beasts of the field shall mangle them. You are undone, O Israel. You had no help but me. Where now is your king? Let him save you. Where are all the chieftains in your towns from whom you demanded? Give me a king and officers. I give you kings in my ire, and take them away in my wrath. Definitely a weighty passage, but it's also quite interesting because of the animals listed. So just to recap here, what are the animal metaphors that are listed in the passage that I just read from? Who wants to summarize the list of animals? Lion, leopard, and bear. Yes, the funny thing is, Jason, I was hoping somebody would say that. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. The word for leopard, namer, can also be translated as tiger. Now, it almost assuredly did not mean tiger. It must mean leopard because they didn't really have tigers over there. However, if you wanted to know the word for tiger, it's actually the same word for leopard. So you could very much say lions and tigers and bears, oh my. How are these animal metaphors being employed here? How are they put to use? And these are verses 7 to 8 on page 190, if you want to look at it again. Josh?
Fairly realistically. Like, bears don't normally, there's a reason they're upset, which having their young taken away. Bears don't normally just out and start killing people.
Yeah, Josh says these are realistic depictions. These are things that animals do. A bear does not often attack unless she is threatened, or especially if her young are threatened. Yes, these animals probably do prefer to attack other animals rather than humans. That is true, Esther. But if only to state the obvious, what sort of animals are these? These are carnivores. These are predators. And who is being described here as these animals? This is God. And who are the people being attacked or threatened by these animals, which are a stand-in for God? It's the people, the tribe of Ephraim, which is a stand-in for all the people in the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. And we see here that God is very much on the attack in a way that we should not, you might not always be able to detect if you aren't reading closely, what God is thinking in these passages. But everyone knows that a bear attacks, a leopard attacks, a lion can attack. God wants us to make no mistake here. And then if you look at verses 9 through 11, we see almost this very sarcastic passage. What do we think of this depiction of God where it says, "Where now is your king? Let him save you"? Myra. God definitely seems very angry. And Josh? Yeah, thank you, Myra.
So I think it's sort of an allusion to idolatry as a whole. It's like, and other prayers we say, it's like mortal kings cannot save. They're not going to do anything. And this is God saying, well, you trusted in mortals instead of me, and that's clearly not what you should have done.
Josh is saying that perhaps this is almost like adultery in a way. It's like Psalm 146, which you read earlier. God is saying, you put your trust in these mortals and not in me. And it's not just mortals, by the way. These people were also guilty of great idolatry. Josh, did you have more?
Yeah, I had something going back to
yeah.
I do think it's interesting. So God likens himself to a lion, a leopard, and a bear. Rip open the casing of their hearts, devour them there like a lion. Then the beasts of the field shall mingle them. It feels like there's a very clear break between God is the one who renders you open, but I think at this point.
Yes, we're definitely going to get to the Assyrians.
Acting is for God. They're the beasts of the field, carrion. So God is not necessarily with them. He's just upset at you. And so the carrion feeders are not likened to God. They're a separate thing, and that's just sort of coming in afterwards.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, this idea that the beasts will come in afterwards and devour us, God doesn't seem to be the one doing this. God is just setting the stage for the animals, the beasts of the field at the end of verse 8 to do that. Very good observation. I didn't actually notice that. Thank you, Josh. And I will admit, though, that while you could argue that perhaps these people had it coming to them for the way they acted, they are apparently great sinners, at least as depicted here. And yet, I confess I don't love it when I hear that God is this sarcastic wisecracker, and it really just makes you think maybe that's the way it should be in certain scenarios. But what is the God that we would like to see? And I only want to ask you that because now we're going to look at the Sephardic version, which is the one that I read from. We're going to turn to page 195. And we're going to go at the very bottom of the page, verse 10. We're going to continue to read until verse 11 on the next page. We're going to read together in English. The Lord will roar like a lion, and they shall march behind him. When he roars, his children shall come fluttering out of the west. They shall flutter from Egypt like sparrows, from the land of Assyria like doves. And I will settle them in their homes, declares Hashem. This is only a chapter removed from what we read in the Ashkenazi version. Clearly, these are related. In both cases, they're talking about, potential punishment for the tribe of Ephraim and the people in the north. If we look at verse 10 on the previous page and verse 11 on 196, which animals are used here? Lions, sparrows, and doves. Now, these are not all God this time. So who is the lion? Still Hashem. Who is the sparrow? The Jewish people in Egypt. And then Assyria is the next part. Who are the doves? The Jews coming from Assyria. This was written at a time, most likely, when it was not clear which was the greater threat to Israel, Egypt or Assyria. It eventually became clear it was Assyria that was the greater power at the time. In any case, what is the relationship here between these animals and our relationship with God that we can see from these comparisons? Esther. No, they don't. Esther, you're right. Lions don't typically care about sparrows or doves. God is leading the people, and they are flying free, being resettled in their home. They're fluttering out of Egypt, out of Assyria, into the land of Canaan, which I will say Israel and Judah, both of them would count here, but this time we're talking about Israel. And why is it that it is written this way? Well, if we look at if we look on page 196, and we look at chapter 12, perhaps I'm on the wrong side. We're actually on page 195. If you go to verse 9, it says, I will not act on my wrath, will not turn to destroy Ephraim, for I am God, not human, the Holy One in your midst. I will not come in fury. What does this say about the difference between God and humans when it says, for I am God, not human? And perhaps there is no difference in our minds, but the author seems to think there is. Josh and then Myra.
Seems to be God is not controlled by.
So perhaps God, unlike humans, is able to control emotion, rein it in. And that is what is indicated here. It says, I will not act on my wrath. So yeah, that could very well be it. Thank you, Josh. Myra. All right, well, great minds think alike. Yes, God is not human. God can regulate emotions. And yet, It seems in the Ashkenazi version, it's not that God couldn't regulate emotion, but in the other chapter, it looks like God did not. And although it does say in the Ashkenazi version that eventually, they would be forgiven, it's this big contrast. In the Ashkenazi version, the animal metaphors and the depiction of God seems more rageful. Which one do you want to embrace? I think you can probably figure out how I feel because I chose to read from the Sephardic version. The animals are a colorful stand-in here for how we want to behave. God is able to approach identical problems in multiple ways. God can be both rageful on one hand and showing restraint on the other hand. In the Haftarah, God represents this ideal that we shouldn't be ruled by our head or by our heart. We should be able to see all sides and never be so predictable as to be set in our ways. There are times when we need to act like a lion, and there are times when we probably need to act more like a lamb or a sparrow. In Genesis 1, God told Adam and Eve to master all the animals, be their master. In our brains, in each of our brains, there is a zoo that houses all of our different attributes, each represented by a different animal. We are the zookeepers. We hold the keys to the cages. We might feel that zoos can be inhumane. We might want to set all these animals free. But if we free them all at the same time, they may very well kill each other. So which attributes or which animals do we want to release? To ponder these questions is to master the animals, or rather, to master ourselves.